Welcome back. All right, so George is back with part 2 of this year's keynote address, titled Personalized Medicine, Psychotherapy, and Psychodynamic Theory, Back to the Future.
So thank you very much. So this is going to be shorter than the other talk, and because we want to leave time for Hannah and we want to leave time for more discussion. So this is just a topic that I've been really interested in for a while now, about personalized medicine. So I'll just tell you a little bit of what I think about it. So first of all, I just want to start with there's a personalized medicine is one of the really, really important recent trends in healthcare, certainly in the United States, but I think in the worldwide. In the U.S., the largest initiative in the history of the NIH is the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Initiative. It's a huge, they've put more money into this than they have practically anything else in its history. You know, the basic principle is like on this slide, it's about you got to find the key to the lock. It's the right treatment for each patient. Each patient needs, so you can see from my talk why I'm interested in this, right? But each patient needs a specific kind of treatment. The model for it is, or this is the hope, this is really the future about, you know, without personalized medicine, you know, there are these bad things that happen, but with personalized medicine, everybody benefits and it's all wonderful. And isn't it just great? So the treatment is completely tailored to the individual patient. That's the goal, that's what people are looking for, and you can see why that's pertinent to psychotherapy, obviously. So it's personalized care is kind of the new buzzword, not just at the NIH, but if you do a search on Google for personalized treatment, or, I mean, you'll be astonished at what you'll find. There's personalized care for everything now, whether it's cancer or dermatology or even dentistry. I mean, it's all about, we're going to personalize the care for you. And if you look at therapist websites, you know, almost every therapist website talks about how they individually tailor the patient to the, tailor the treatment to the patient's needs and so on. I even, in the course of finding, looking for personalized treatment, I even found a whole center that works on people that are addicted to Zoloft. I didn't know people got addicted to Zoloft. But if you're addicted to Zoloft, there's a personalized treatment for you. So there's a personalized treatment for everything. And that is the buzz not only in research and at the NIH, but on the internet. It's everywhere. So the question I pose is this: is this emphasis on personalized medicine, is that the future that we're looking at, or are we on the road to rediscovery? Is this something that we've been to or seen before? And I think this slide says it all. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, but those who do study history are doomed to stand by helplessly while everyone else repeats it. I love this slide. There's a lot of truth in some cartoons. So let's travel back in time a couple thousand years here, and then we'll come back to the future, okay? So let's start with Hippocrates, the father of medicine, right? 460 to 370 BCE. And Hippocrates' big contribution was that disease is not a punishment by the gods. It's more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. So this is the quintessential basics of personalized medicine. Get to know the person. Don't be so wrapped up in the disease. Who's the person with the disease? That's Hippocrates. So there's this, if you look at the history of medicine, of which I am not an expert, but I just like playing around with this and learning a little bit about it, there's a long tension between what they call the host-pathogen interaction. There's the host and there's the pathogen. And medicine has shifted back and forth. Hippocrates was focusing on the host, right? But then a lot of medicine focuses on the pathogen. And there's a dialectic tension in the history of medicine between these two things. And that's what that dialectic slide is all about. So if we go to Louis Pasteur, who was the father of germ theory, right? That's all about the pathogen. And Claude Bernard, who was a French microbiologist, at his death, Louis Pasteur said Bernard was right. The germ is nothing. The terrain is everything. And by the terrain, he meant the host. It's where the germ lands that is really important. So this is part of that dialectic tension. Now, in cancer, it's a really interesting thing because we're now all about the host. I mean, not all about, but immunotherapy, right, is all about the host. Well, there's this interesting character I'd never heard of named Stephen Paget, a British MD, 1855 to 1926, who developed what he called the seed and the soil hypothesis. And the gist of it is this quote here: the seed of plants are carried in all direction, but they can only live and grow if they fall on congenial soil. And what he meant by that, the idea of cancer was it's all about the cell, but he's drawing attention to the fact of no, it's about where the cell lands. And he did amazing studies of autopsies of hundreds of patients and found that it was really complicated. If that were true, that it's all about the cell, it would be randomly distributed, but it's not. Cells land on certain organs. There are certain kind of environmental factors that are critical in the development of cancer. So Stephen Paget wrote about this a lot, and it's research, ironically, that is just now being sort of rediscovered in terms of the whole immunotherapy bent in cancer treatment right now. So this goes back a ways. And lastly, we come to the father, so-called father of modern medicine, Sir William Osler, one of the founders of Johns Hopkins. And he, like I suppose parroting Hippocrates, says, the good physician treats the disease, the great physician treats the patient who has the disease. So there's that personalized bent that you're seeing through all of these people. Now, there's a similar emphasis about personalizing and individually tailoring messages. This has a very, very, it's been evident outside of medicine for a very, very long time. So if we go back very early, this is an image that has intrigued me for a long time. You've seen this 1,000 times. In Sanskrit, it's called the 1,000-hand Avalokiteshvara. The Bodhisattva of skillful means, commonly known from other traditions as Kuan Yin. Now, what's interesting about this Bodhisattva is that this is a Bodhisattva with 1,000 hands. And I'd seen this image for years and years. I thought, what is up with that? I thought, that's just these Buddhist icons are weird and blah, blah. Well, I did a little bit of research in it, and there's a lot of meaning to those 1,000 hands and the skillful means. And the meaning behind it is that you have to tailor your teaching of the Dharma to the particular person. So there are 1,000 hands on this Bodhisattva because some of them have lotuses, some of them have books, some of them have food, some of them have daggers, some of them have sticks, and so on. So there, you have to tailor how you teach to the person you're trying to teach. Again, this is personalized instruction. So Passover is coming up in a week, and here's just a picture of a typical Seder, right? Except it happens to be with a couple of great people at the White House. So in the Passover Haggadah, it's interesting that there are 4 sons that are mentioned in the Haggadah, and the idea of the 4 sons is that you have to do the teaching of the Haggadah, is the recitation of the Exodus from Egypt of the Jews, and the point of the 4 sons is that the teaching has to be done to the particulars of who each son is. There's a smart son, there's a bad son, there's a simple one, and so on. So it has to be tailored to that person. In education, I love this quote, if a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way we learn, the way they learn. What a novel idea, right? So, one last slide about this. In psychology, this was Lee Cronbach's work. It's over 60 years old now, but it's about the aptitude by treatment interaction. You can't just look at a treatment and try to, whatever it is, whether it's education or therapy. He wasn't talking about therapy, but he was talking about any experimental treatment. You can't look at the treatment without taking into account the aptitude of the person receiving the treatment. So, this has a very, my only point in bombarding you with all these slides is this has a very, very long history in medicine, outside of medicine, in education, and so on. Now, it's ironic because nowhere should such a personalized, patient-centered philosophy be more evident than in the field of psychotherapy, right? I mean, that is the quintessential personal experience. There are, you could hardly think of experiences that are more personal than psychotherapy. So if we see this anywhere, we ought to see the personalized approach in psychotherapy. But we don't, at least the way things are going at a policy level right now, at a research level, because we are completely obsessed with schools and brands of psychotherapy. So we have brands and brands and brands and more brands, and it just doesn't end. There are over, believe it or not now, there are over 400 brands of psychotherapy. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. There can't be 400 different kinds of psychotherapy. Maybe there, I mean, how many can there be? 5, 6, 7? But there can't be 400. This is called the narcissism of small differences. You know, people make, and then they develop their brand. And people are trademarking their brands and patenting their brand. I mean, there's an insanity that's going on. And it's the opposite of this kind of personalized thing that we're talking about. So psychotherapy training and a lot of research I looked up, I thought, what's the opposite of personalized? I mean, I didn't know. I thought, generic? I looked it up. The opposite of personalized is depersonalized. And it turns out that the research, so the psychotherapy training and research is depersonalized. The focus is on which brand is ideally suited for which diagnosis, rather than the personalized approach of optimizing the treatment for a particular patient. That's a problem. And I think we run the risk of becoming like this physician, where all they're looking at are the lab results and they're completely ignoring the patient in front of them, right? I hope we're not that bad, but it's a lot of people in medicine say that this is a problem. So a lot of the depersonalization in our field stems from the whole obsession with randomized controlled trials, that we treat patients as uniform and equivocal. We treat treatments and we don't even call them therapists in research, right? Or insurance companies don't call you a therapist. They call you a provider. And the idea of a provider is that you're just an interchangeable unit, right? It's all the same. But if I showed you anything in the earlier slide, you could see that is not true, right? There are a lot of differences between. So they're not interchangeable, and that's the kind of thing that I think is leading to this sort of depersonalized approach that we're seeing. The irony is that clinicians are at the opposite extreme. I mean, clinicians are all focusing on, this is what I do, and that's how it should be. I tailor what I do to your needs. But at a policy level, at a training level, at a research level, it's a lot more like this kind of depersonalized sort of approach, which I think is really harmful. So in my previous talk, I think I illustrated, and I hope you got the point, about how the personalized approach can be meaningfully applied to psychotherapy in a way that's both useful for research and also useful clinically. And the gist of it is looking at the mediation effect of how a person's schema mediates what goes on in psychotherapy. That it's really, really important to get a handle on how the patient holds, what is their experience, how did they internalize that, and to be able to work with that. So optimizing the effectiveness of psychotherapy requires a few things. It requires the personalized case-specific approach that I illustrated. It requires a formulation of the patient's adaptive goals and the impediments to their achievement. It requires evaluation of therapist responsiveness. In other words, did the therapist understand and helped us confirm the pathogenic schema? And finally, and this I want to emphasize this last point, it requires a lot more rigorous training in case formulation, because a lot of the training that's going on right now has completely eliminated case formulation from the lexicon. So in a lot of psychology graduate school training, there's hardly no training anymore in case formulation. It's all about learning most typically CBT, but it may be one of the other 400 brands, but case formulation is pretty, and I think that there's been, here at UCSF we do some of that, but the residents clearly need a lot more of that. And it's the kind of thing that you need over a long period of time, but I think it's the only way we're going to get out of this depersonalized mode that the field is falling into. We have a number of people who are great speakers and great leaders and educators for personalized medicine. I put one up here. He happens to be at Stanford. I should have put one from UCSF. But Abraham Verghese, who you may know as a novelist, wrote Cutting for Stone and other novels, is a brilliant and very highly valued teacher. And this is what he says about personalized medicine. Let's take away the incentives to do to patients and instead create incentives to do for patients, to be with patients. We don't need to do comparative effectiveness trials to see if that works. We can just ask the patient. And I think that's the kind of tone that we need a lot more of. We have, at UCSF, we do have Rachel Remen, who's a very popular teacher, and she advocates a very, very similar kind of approach to the medical students. But I think this is something that we need a lot in medicine, and I think we particularly need it in our field because of the dangers that I talk about, that we're moving in this really depersonalized kind of way, which is anathema to psychotherapy. One of the probably greatest examples of that kind of personalized approach to therapy was actually Bob Wallerstein. And Bob was one of was the director of the famous Menninger Foundation psychotherapy research study. It was initially designed almost as a quasi-controlled trial where they would put people in these two conditions. But to his credit, Bob spent many, many years going over that data and wrote this really brilliant book called 42 Lives in Treatment, where he really looked at he dug down deep to look at what was going on in these therapies and why did they work. And I think that's the kind of attitude and the kind of work that we need in our field to make the therapy, to bring therapy back to the personalized place that, well, certainly the psychodynamic theory has, that's one of the, whatever one thinks about psychodynamic theory, and it has many flaws for sure, and I'm aware of a lot of them, but one of the great things that psychodynamic theory had going is it does aim as a theory. It aims for a very deep understanding about people and to really get at what is up with this particular person. And I think that's something we need in our training and in our field. Whether you use the techniques or not, as I think you know from my other talk, I don't care about that. That's beside the point. But if you can focus on that attitude of really trying to understand the essence about a person, that is really, really valuable. And I think Bob exemplified that beautifully in the way he concluded the Menninger Foundation study. So I said this would be short, so this is the conclusion I have for you, is that there's this very long history showing the importance of tailoring what is taught to the individual learner. And I think we can greatly improve the effectiveness of psychotherapy and the clinical relevance of our research by heeding this very sage advice. So I'm going to leave it there and thank you. And